Yeah, I just opened up Webster's covenant, and it says usually a formal and binding agreement. Number two is a written agreement or promise, usually under seal between two or more parties.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So an agreement of promise,
by
and
a covenant. Yeah.
yeah, and that's called a covenant. They, they have references to a marriage covenant. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So there's that also,
Mm.
uh, that phrase, a marriage covenant, which means the two who get married, they make like a vow to each other. They say their vows, but it's also a covenant. They're agreeing and they're promising to love each other for the rest of their lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
See, so you got a sense of that meaning. So we could look at all the senses of the meaning of the word covenant. What was the other one? A sacred covenant, which then,
Yeah.
you go along the lines of a sacred covenant. Well, God has to be involved in that.
Well, I think that's what
The
Armando was
holy, the
asking.
sacred covenant.
I
Hello,
said,
Daphne. I see Daphne. Every time I see Daphne, I'm looking for Susie.
yeah,
Where's our sister Susie?
they're usually tied together. So,
So
yeah, where's
please,
Susie?
please call
I just told
Susie.
her. I just told her.
I know it's like your new assignment now.
Oh, good.
Make sure Susie doesn't miss class. So
Yeah, that
Mondo,
time threw me off. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, y'all.
No, I
Yeah,
know
it
that's
threw
all
me
that.
right.
off.
We'll work it out. But do you understand now, Mondo, that once you start with the definition of an agreement of promise, a sacred agreement, a divine promise, uh, so there are different kinds of covenants. So to keep it simple, they say there are like 7 covenants that God made. But the only covenant we need to focus on is the old covenant and the new covenant. Okay, Mondo? Still with
So,
me?
so, so, what's the difference between that? So, should be paying attention to not like I already got baptized and all that. So,
No, no, don't
what
even look at
would
baptism as part of that. You just got to look at the word first, covenant. When we look at the covenant that is known as, commonly referred to as the old covenant, you got to think of Moses. Okay? You got to stick with me on this. It's a little complicated, but you know, you keep repeating it again and again, it'll eventually start to sink in. So for everybody, right, who is looking at the word covenant and then attaching it to Moses, now we're looking at what is referred to as the old covenant or the first covenant. Okay, this agreement of promise. Then you got to process this with thinking who was involved in this first covenant. Well,
Jesus,
first it's God,
Jesus
then
Christ.
Moses. What?
Is
Okay.
it Jesus Christ in the new covenant?
We're not talking about the new covenant. We're talking about the old covenant.
Okay.
Yeah, let's sort it out first. So you got the old covenant,
The
the first
law.
covenant. God is involved, Moses is involved,
uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
and then the people of Israel
Mm-hmm.
are involved. So with that covenant, you can read it in the first 5 books of the Bible. Okay, so in
Mm-hmm.
the first 5 books of the Bible,
The
which is
Pentateuch.
yeah, the Pentateuch, which is referred penta. There's that word again,
Pentateuch.
penta,
Yeah.
like pentagon. The
Mm-hmm.
first five books.
Right.
So when you're thinking along the lines of the first covenant or the old covenant, it includes Moses and the law, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. So that's what you have in the first or old covenant. Okay, Mondo?
Amen, Pastor.
Okay. The more you read the law, the more you'll start to understand It has basic information concerning the ways of God as revealed in the law. And so in the law, which is again the old covenant, the first covenant, you have what is referred to as the blessings of obedience. So if you obey the law, you'll be blessed. But there's also the curses of disobedience. So if you disobey the law, there'll be a curse. So it has that curse and blessing. Okay? That's the first covenant. That's the old covenant. And always think of Moses as your point person for the first and the old covenant. Now, when we get to the new covenant, okay, the new covenant now is, again, that divine promise, sacred agreement, right? An agreement of promise. So when you're talking along the lines of the new covenant, who is our point person for the new covenant?
Jesus.
Jesus.
Mondo, does that make sense? It's Jesus.
Amen, Pastor. Amen.
Okay, so Jesus fulfills the promise of this new covenant because Jeremiah, 600 years before Jesus, promises that there would be a new covenant. So 600 years later, Jesus appears and says, with the cup, this is the cup of the new covenant in my blood.
Or changes behavior or suicidal thoughts.
Do this in remembrance of me. So he's establishing this new covenant. It needed blood because you got to look at it like it's a will. And it only goes into effect when death happens. So Jesus's blood is what we look at as the death certificate. I know it's a little technical, but that death certificate then says, okay, that new covenant, that agreement, the will of God, the new covenant now goes into effect now that the one who made it has died. And so Jesus died, and that puts into effect the new covenant. So that's the difference
Amen,
between the
Pastor.
old covenant and the new covenant. And between
Thank you,
Jesus and
Pastor.
Moses, you're looking at almost 1,500 years, 1,500 years between Jesus and Moses. Is that right? Do I have my dating correct? Something along the lines of 1,500 years, I think, maybe even 2,000, close to 2,000 years. Okay? So that's the difference between the two. The distance is probably, let's just, round up 2,000 years between Jesus and Moses. Moses brings the old covenant, the first covenant. Jesus brings the new covenant, which then replaces the old covenant. Some people have a problem with the idea that the new covenant replaces the old covenant. And, how can you say that there's, that the old covenant is replaced? Well, it has been with the new covenant. You can't have two covenants going on at the same time. That's what we have here with the old covenant and the new covenant. You can't have them both going on at the same time. And do you know the major reason? David, I see your hand, so I'll call on you after I explain this. Do you know the major reason, according to the book of Hebrews, the major reason why you can't have both going on at the same time? And you guys will probably say, wow, I didn't realize that. But do you know the major reason why you can't have both happening at the same time?
Because you can't serve two masters.
One at a time? What at a time? Who
Because you
said you
can't
can't
serve
serve two masters?
Daphne.
Okay. it's not an issue of master, because you're serving the same God. It's just serving God under a new agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, because of the law in Moses in the old covenant, Pastor,
Well,
that
yeah,
we have
that's
to follow the 600,
yeah. I mean, it is definitely a different way.
613.
Yeah, it's a different way of living for God. But do you know the major reason why you can't have both?
Why?
Because of the priesthood.
The priesthood.
Yeah. In the first covenant,
Oh, I get it.
the first covenant has the Levitical priesthood, right? They become mediators of the first covenant, right?
Okay.
Which
So
is
so
called
now I go straight to Jesus then,
the
right,
Levitical
Pastor?
priesthood in the old covenant. In the new covenant, who is the high priest?
Jesus.
Jesus is the
Jesus.
priest. Yeah, the high priest. And so you can't have two priesthoods going on at the same time. So that makes it obviously clear that we have to go to one or the other. Who would you rather go to? The priesthood of Aaron, or the Levitical priesthood, or the priesthood of Jesus Christ?
I'll
Jesus
go
Jesus
with
Christ.
Christ.
Jesus.
Of
And that's
Jesus.
why God said you can only go with one. You can't go with both. It's because of the priesthood. Jesus is the mediator. What in Hebrews it says Jesus is a mediator of a better covenant with better promises.
Mm.
Better priesthood, better promises, better mediator. Why go to the old one if you have something that's better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so hopefully when I do a quiz, you'll be able to answer that question. Why do we have to go under one covenant and you can't be under two covenants, both covenants? What's the answer again?
You can't
Priesthood.
have two priesthoods going on at the same time.
Very good. And you can't be going, I wouldn't go to the Levitical priesthood if I have a choice, right? I'd rather go to Jesus. See? David, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say I know you brought up this topic and I love what you were just saying as I was listening, but I think for myself that I really this is the first time in my entire life that I've read the Bible, that I'm reading the whole entire Bible. And it just for me as a I wouldn't say a new believer, but it's someone that's really, reading the Bible for the first time and really understanding the Bible
Yeah.
is you really appreciate the fact because right now I've read Leviticus and Numbers, and you're like, it just really makes you appreciate even more to understand what Jesus did for us. When it comes to John 16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only son,
Yeah.
because there were so many laws and rules. I mean, if anybody else have read those, it's like every single thing they did, they had a sacrifice, and you couldn't do this. And this third day, you were unclean. And I mean, it was unbelievable, with the plague and everything. So it just, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like you never would have made it. You know what I mean? Like it's impossible.
Yeah. It had a system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, that system was to acknowledge God's holiness and God's requirements for the sinful children of Israel, which we all are sinful. They needed to understand that the God who wants to dwell with them, they need to understand how holy, pure, and clean God is. And the people were always having to deal with the fact that they are unclean, as well as, sinners. So they always had to be confronted with that understanding. And the way God takes care of those things is with the sacrifices, among other things, but, sacrifices were part of their worship. See? So, you learn God's ways, and you learn about God's holiness, and how you learn about man's sinful condition. It's just part of, learning as you continue to study the Word of God. Yeah. But, with that question asked about what's the difference between the old covenant and the new covenant, hopefully you're having a clearer understanding, more than you did yesterday. And what was the other thought that you guys had in mind about? Okay, you guys seem to like to want to learn and read more about the Bible, and even Daphne was showing us the book that talks about the Bible, like every page or couple of pages for each book of the Bible. You know, you can also have that on YouTube. Are you guys aware of that as a resource? If you don't, I'm going to show you that. Okay. I want you guys to learn the resources that's available out there. And Bible Project is one of the best resources for summarizing the book. You guys, does anybody, here's an example. Give me a book in the Bible, any book in the Bible, any book. Shout it out.
Habakkuk, Jeremiah, Esther. That's a good one.
Okay. All right.
Joe.
Okay, good.
Micah or Mika.
Okay, there's a lot now. There's a lot. So if any of those books, I got to share my screen with you now. Okay, I'm going to share with you my screen, because any of those books, you can do research on YouTube using Bible Project.
Oh, is that where it is?
Yeah, it's in Bible Project. So do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes. And they have a drawing also.
Yeah. And so
Nice.
you wanted a book. Let's get a popular book. Nothing too weird or
Yeah.
isolated.
Hebrew,
Not popular.
Galatians.
I'm trying to think of a short book, but at the same time,
Galatians.
How about Philippians?
okay, let's go with Galatians.
That's pretty short.
Yeah, it's 6 chapters. So you would look up any book in the Bible. I think Galatians, you would look it up and then type in Bible Project.
Oh.
There it is. So Galatians Bible Project.
Hmm.
Okay. And so by typing that up, you find this summary. See, it says Book of Galatians Summary, a complete animated overview. So then, just like what you were looking at
Paul's
with
letter to the Galatians. It was written to another.
Okay, just like when you're looking at that booklet that had 1 page for each book of the Bible, here is one. Okay, well, it'll give you a summary.
Number of churches in the region of Galatia where Paul had traveled on one of his missionary journeys. You can read the stories in the book of Acts. He wrote this important letter from a place of deep passion and frustration. Here's the backstory. Christianity began as a Jewish messianic movement in Jerusalem, but its message was for all humanity, and so it quickly spread beyond Israel. By Paul's time as a missionary, there were as many non-Jews as there were Jewish people in the Jesus movement, and this sparked a huge debate that we know about from the book of Acts chapter 15. Historically, the covenant people of God were focused in one ethnic group, Israel, and they were set apart by practices commanded in the Torah, like circumcision of males, eating kosher, observing the Sabbath. And there were many Jewish Christians who believed that for all of these non-Jews to truly become a part of God's family, they needed to obey the laws of the Torah. And so some of these Jewish Christians ended up coming to the Galatian churches. They were undermining Paul and demanding circumcision of all these male non-Jewish Christians, and so many of them were. And when Paul found out, he was brokenhearted and angry, and this letter is the result. He first challenges the Galatians with his summary of the gospel message about the crucified Messiah. He then argues that this gospel is what creates the new multi-ethnic family of Jesus and Abraham, and then he shows how this gospel is what truly transforms people by the presence and power of the Spirit. He opens by expressing his bewilderment that the Galatians have embraced a different gospel. It's the one promoted by these Christians who badmouth Paul.
This will give you a summary.
Paul first defends the authenticity of his message.
If you don't get it the first time, right? Then you read the book, and then look at, watch this again. So what I would do first, you watch this video. Then after you watch this video, you read the book from beginning to end. Okay? Tie in what you watched with what you read. Okay? And then after reading the book, then watch this again to see if it's helping you absorb it. Because what you're trying to do is just absorb the whole book. Now, obviously, I spent about, 20 hours teaching each verse with you guys?
Yeah.
So it'll take a lot of hours to absorb it the way we do it, one verse at a time. But at least you get this is like your thumbnail sketch of one book. Now, when I was talking to Daphne offline, right, Daphne?
Yes.
Well, you were reading the book of Genesis to me and how they had it
Yes.
all on one page or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So now you do the same thing. Genesis, Bible Project. Now this one has part 1, so it's more than 2 videos. You know, so it says part 1 of 2. Okay, so let's just get into part 1.
The book of Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and its storyline divides into 2 main parts. There's chapters 1 through 11, which tell the story of God and the whole world, and then there's chapters 12 through 50, which zoom in and tell the story of God and just one man, Abraham, and then.
So if I were to just give you a real quick trivia quiz, how many chapters does the book of Genesis have?
50.
50. Okay. Now now it's here broken down into 2 parts. The first part, I call it introduction, because it talks about God and how he created the world. You talk about Adam and Eve. You talk about the fall. You talk about the first murder. You talk about Noah's Ark. Then you talk about Tower of Babel, all in chapter 1 through 11. Now, that's a small part of the Bible, right? That's only like 20%. That's only 20% of the Bible. The rest of it, which is 80%, is from chapter 12 to chapter 50. And what is chapter 12 to 50 all about? That's another trivia, but it's no longer about the creation of the world. You got 80%.
Abraham.
78% pretty much. You answered it, Princess. It's about Abraham's family. So when you're reading the book of Genesis, you got the first 11 chapters counted as introduction, but the meat of the book, it's in the story of Abraham and his family, okay?
And these 2 parts are connected by a hinge story at the beginning of chapter 12. And this design, it gives us a clue to how to understand the message of the book as a whole, and how it introduces the story of the whole Bible.
This is,
so the book
again,
begins with God
resource.
taking the disorder and the darkness described in the second sentence of the Bible, and God brings out of it order and beauty
So
and goodness, and makes a world where life
part
can
1.
flourish.
He's
and God
talking about all that stuff that I just mentioned, okay? Then you want to get into part 2. We're talking about Abraham's family. Here we are.
The book of Genesis. In the first video, we saw how chapters 1 through 11 set up the basic storyline of the Bible. God has created all things, and he makes humans in his image to rule the world on his behalf. The humans choose sin and rebellion, and so the world spins out of control into violence and death, all leading up to the rebellion and scattering of the people in Babylon. And so the big question is, what is God going to do to rescue and redeem his world? Well, out of that scattering at Babylon, the author traces a genealogy of just one family that leads eventually to a man named Abram, later known as Abraham. And God's promise to Abraham at the beginning of chapter 12 opens up a whole new movement in the story. God calls Abraham to leave his home and go to the land of Canaan, which God says will become his one day. And in that land, God promises to make Abraham into a great nation, to make his name great and to bless him. Now, these promises are connected back to earlier parts of the book. So Babylon had arrogantly tried to make a great name for itself, and that didn't go over very well.
Remember, when you read about Jesus's genealogy, Jesus's genealogy traces back to Abraham. But that's where you got Genesis. Almost 80% of the book talks about Abraham and his family. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, and then Joseph, because Joseph is the one who saved the children of Israel. Okay? You guys getting it a little?
Yes.
So now that you understand that Genesis focuses on Abraham's family, then when you get to the next book, what is it about? What's the next book about? Exodus.
Isn't it Noah? It's Noah, isn't it?
No, the book of Exodus continues the story of Joseph and his family, right? It continues. And because it continues, we find them 400 years later in Egypt being enslaved to Egypt. Are you still with me? So Exodus.
Amen.
What?
Yes.
Okay, so now
And
we go to
Exodus
Exodus.
is
What was that?
oh well, Exodus is basically the Exodus out of Egypt, correct?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's a continuation of the story of
Yeah.
Abraham's family.
Okay. Good. Yeah.
So here we are.
The book of Exodus. It's the second book of the Bible, and it picks up the storyline from the previous book, Genesis, which ended with Abraham's grandson
That's why you
Jacob
gotta
leading his
be
large family of
familiar
70
with
people to Egypt.
the
Now Jacob's 11th son
family
Joseph had been elevated to
names,
second in command
Abraham,
over
Isaac,
Egypt, and he had saved his whole family in a famine. And so Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, offered the family to come live there as a safe haven. And so eventually Jacob dies there in Egypt, and Joseph and all his brothers do too. About 400 years pass, and the story of the Exodus begins. Now that name refers to the event that takes place in the first half of the book, Israel's exodus from Egypt. But the book has a second half that takes place at the foot of Mount Sinai. In this video, we'll just focus on the first half, where centuries have passed, and the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied, and they filled the land. Now this line is a deliberate echo back to the blessing God gave all humanity back in the Garden of Eden. And it reminds us of the big
Again,
biblical
every
story so
time
far.
you come
Humanity
up
forfeited God's
across resources, they're not going to be 100% accurate, but they sure help.
blessing through sin and rebellion. And so God chose Abraham's family as the
You
vehicle.
always gotta
through
go
which
Why
he
is
would
it
restore
going
blessing to
so
all the world. But the new
fast?
Pharaoh does not view Israel
Because
as a blessing. He
I'm
actually thinks
showing you
growing
the
Israelite
books
immigrant with
rather
a threat
than
to God.
getting
And so just
into
as in
the
Genesis,
whole.
humanity rebels against
Okay.
God's blessing, so here
Yeah.
Pharaoh attempts to
I
destroy the
just want
source of
to
God's blessing.
show
the
you
Israelites.
how
He brutally enslaves them in forced labor, and then he orders that
Genesis
all the Israelite
developed,
boys be
and
drowned in
then
the
now
Nile River. Now
we're
Pharaoh,
in
he is the worst character in the Bible so far.
Exodus.
His kingdom epitomizes humanity's rebellion against God. Pharaoh has so redefined good and evil according to his own
See, so
interests that even the murder of
gets
innocent children
into
has become
part
good.
2 now. Let's go to part 2.
The book of Exodus. In the first video, we explored chapters 1 through 18, which tell the foundational story of how God rescued the enslaved Israelites by confronting and defeating Pharaoh, while offering a way of escape through the blood of the Passover lamb. God then delivered his
They
people by
all
bringing them through the
escape.
waters of the sea and then into the
Red
wilderness, where
Sea, all
surprisingly
that
they
stuff.
grumbled and complained. Now the second half of the book of Exodus opens as Moses leads Israel to the foot of Mount Sinai, where God invites the nation of Israel to enter into a covenant relationship.
here's
And
that
here we
word
reach another key
covenant.
moment in the biblical storyline,
Here it
because this
is.
is picking
Got
up and developing
that?
God's promise.
Mondo?
Amen, Pastor.
See, here's the covenant of who? The first covenant is what?
Moses.
Moses.
Yeah, there you go. That's where we're at.
Abraham. So remember, from the book of Genesis, God promised that through Abraham's family, somehow he would restore his blessing to all of the nations. And here we find out more. God says that if Israel obeys the terms of the covenant, they will be so shaped by God's laws and teaching and justice that they will become a kingdom of priests, which means that they will become God's representatives and
people
show
think it's
all of
for
the
the
other nations
whole
what God is
world.
truly
No,
like.
it's
Now,
only
the people
for
of Israel
Israel.
eagerly accept the offer. And so God's presence appears right on the top of Mount Sinai in the form of cloud and lightning and thunder. And Moses goes up as their representative, and God opens with the basic terms of the covenant, the famous 10 commandments. These are like the basic terms of the agreement,
There
how the
you
Israelites
go.
and God are going to
Okay?
relate to each other. And then after this come another collection of commands.
So after Exodus is what book?
Leviticus.
Leviticus.
Okay. Again, it's a continuation now of God giving them more laws.
Wait, Pastor Bert, really quick. This is do you know who Moses's parents were?
Yeah.
Not a quiz. I just don't know. I just want to know.
Yeah, it's written.
Okay, no, because he's so big in the Bible. He's just such a huge I'm reading so much about him, you know.
Yeah. His name is found in the book of Exodus. His parents are found.
Got it. Okay.
Exodus 6:20.
What does it say?
The father is Amram and the mother is Jochebed.
Jochebed. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Princess.
So Amram and Jochebed are the parents, and
Wow.
understand that Moses is from the tribe of Levi, the Leviticus.
Wow.
See, the Levites have to do with the Leviticus priesthood. See, you were just reading that. This would, as you read it, come back to this.
Yeah.
Book of
good.
Leviticus.
It's the third
Here
book of
we
the Bible,
are.
and it's set right after the exodus of the Israelites from their slavery, when God brought them to the foot of Mount Sinai and invited Israel into a covenant relationship. Now, they had quickly rebelled and broke that covenant, and God wanted for his glorious presence to come and live right in the midst of Israel in the form of this tabernacle. But Israel's sin has damaged the relationship. So, at the end of the previous book, Exodus, Moses, as Israel's representative, could not even enter God's presence in the tent. The book of Leviticus opens by reminding us of this fundamental problem. It says, the Lord called to Moses from the tent. So the question
Remember,
is,
it's
how
God
can
who
Israel,
wanted
in
to
their sin
dwell
and
with
selfishness,
them,
be reconciled
but
to this
this
holy
is
God?
how-
That's what
this
this book
is
is all about.
God's
How God
terms
is
of
graciously
how he
providing a way for
dwells
sinful,
with
corrupt people to live in his
them.
holy presence. Now, let's pause for a second and explore this really important idea that God is holy. It's fundamental to
God's
understanding. The word holy
presence.
means simply to be set apart or unique. And in the Bible,
Out
God
of
is set apart
all
from all
the
other things
places
because
in
of his
the
unique role
world,
as the
God
creator of all,
decided
as
he
the author
wants
of
to
life
be
itself.
with
And so if
them.
God is holy, then the space around God is also holy. It's full of his goodness and his life and purity and justice. So if Israel, who is unjust and sinful, wants to live in God's holy presence, they too need to become holy. Their sin has to be dealt with. Thus, book of Leviticus. Now, the book has a really amazing symmetrical design. It explores the three main ways that God helps Israel to live in his presence. The outer sections are descriptions of the rituals Israel was to practice in God's holy presence. The next inner sections focus on the role of Israel's
These
priests
are
as mediators
laws.
between God and Israel. And inside of that are two matching sections that focus on Israel's purity. And then right here at the center of the book, there's a key ritual, the Day of Atonement, that brings the whole book together. The book concludes with a short
Okay, there you
section where
go.
Moses calls on Israel to be
So
faithful.
you got rituals, the priests, and then the purity laws, right? What they need to do to make sure they stay pure in God's presence.
Hmm.
And it requires the priests and the priests following the rituals, just the way it is, God's way. Okay, and then from there, who's read the book of Numbers?
I'm reading it right now.
Me.
Okay, so now the book of Numbers is a continuation of Moses and the children of Israel, but then they're also dealing with some drama, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
They talk about heaven.
What's that?
They talk about the heavens.
In Numbers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. I mean, whatever verses you find that reference
The book
that,
of Numbers.
sure.
This fourth book of the Bible carries forward the story of Israel after their
Again,
exodus
this
from
is just a
slavery in Egypt. God
summary.
had brought them to
Don't
Mount Sinai,
expect to
and he
get
entered into a
everything.
covenant with them there. And despite Israel's rebellion, God had graciously provided a way for Israel to live near his holy presence in the
There's that
tabernacle.
word
The book of
covenant
Numbers
again.
begins as Israel wraps up their 1-year stay at Mount Sinai, and they head out into the wilderness on their way to the land that God promised Abraham. Now, the book's storyline is designed according to the stages of their journey. So the first section begins at Mount Sinai, but then they set out and travel to the wilderness of Paran. And then from there, they travel to the plains of Moab, which is right across from the Promised Land. Now, the first part opens with a census where the people are numbered. That's where the book gets its name. And then there are laws about how the tribes of Israel were to be arranged in their camp. So the tabernacle was to be at the center, and then around that, the priests and the Levites, and then around them, the 12 tribes
Okay,
neatly
so
arranged
after
with
the
Judah
book
at their
of
head.
Numbers,
Now, this was
this
all
is the
elaborate.
fifth book now. What is the fifth book?
Kings.
No, fifth book.
Exodus, Leviticus.
Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy.
Wow.
Genesis. I was going through the books in order. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Now we're doing Deuteronomy.
Oh, okay. I didn't know where.
The book of Deuteronomy is the fifth book of the Bible
That's
and
all
final
right.
book of the Torah.
Yes.
After the exodus from Egypt, Israel was at Mount Sinai for 1 year, entering into a covenant with their
It's
God.
kind
And then
of
they had
like
the disastrous
a
road trip through the wilderness, and the
retelling
Exodus generation
of
disqualified
what
themselves from
happened.
entering into the land promised to Abraham. And so Deuteronomy begins with Moses standing in front of this new generation, explaining the Torah. And it's from here that the design and purpose of the book unfolds. Deuteronomy is a series of speeches from Moses where he's calling the next generation of
Again,
Israel
it's
to be
all
faithful to
about
the covenant between
Israel.
God.
It's
At the
all
center of the
about
book is a collection of laws,
Abraham,
which are the
Isaac,
terms
and
of the covenant
Jacob's
between God and
family.
Israel. Some of the laws are new, but many are repeated from the laws given earlier at Mount Sinai. And that's actually where this book gets its name, from a Greek word deuteronomion, which means a second law. Now, surrounding these laws are 2 outer sections of Moses' speech. Each of these are broken up into 2 parts themselves. Let's just dive in and we'll see how this whole thing works. So Moses first of all summarizes the story so far, and he highlights how rebellious the previous generation was, in contrast with God's
Second
constant
law
grace
is
and
like
provision in
repeating the
wilderness.
laws
God did bring
again.
his justice on them, yes, but he did not abandon his covenant promises. After this comes a series of very passionate sermons where Moses calls on this new generation to be more faithful
it's
than their
like,
parents were to the covenant. He reminds them of the 10 Commandments,
let's
and then the
talk about
centerpiece of
the
the section is a famous line
history,
called
and
the
let's
Shema.
talk
Moses says,
about
"Listen, Israel, the Lord is our
the
God, the Lord is one,
covenant,
and you shall
and
love
talk
the Lord
about
your God
all
with all of
these
your heart,
things.
with all of your soul, and with all of
This
your
is the
mind." This became a
final
very important
book
daily prayer
of
in
the
Judaism,
law.
and it brings all of the themes of the book together. So
And
the word listen,
so
or Shema in Hebrew, it means much
it's
more than
like
just to hear.
he's
Its meaning
gonna
includes responding to what you hear,
kind
or
of
English we
like
would say, obey.
summarize
The word love in
everything,
Hebrew
and
also means much more than just an
this is
emotion or
where you
feeling. It's
have
about
the
a decision
account
of
of
wholehearted devotion to God
Moses
that involves your
also
will and your emotions,
dying,
your mind,
and
and your heart.
also
Now, for
Aaron
Israel, their obedience
dying,
and devotion to God served a much larger
of old
purpose.
age
Obedience to
and
the law
so
is going to make
forth.
Israel a unique
And
people
then
among the nations. Just like God said at Mount Sinai, they'll become a kingdom of priests.
that's
And
the
Moses now
whole
says
law,
how
guys.
Israel has the
The
chance of
first
following the laws
5
to show the whole
books.
world the wisdom and
Okay?
justice of God. The other key idea in the Shema is that
Where do we
Israel was
go
called to
from
obey and be
here?
devoted to the
Now
Lord
that
alone. Or
Moses
literally in
and
Hebrew it says
Aaron
the Lord.
dies, where do we go?
We go to the
Yes.
leadership of Joshua, Pastor.
Okay, you got to find the fact that Joshua now is taking over, replacing Moses. See, it's still about the Jews. It's still about. So when you go there, they're continuing this storyline, which is now you're getting a better understanding of the history of the Jews, starting with Abraham in Genesis. So let me just take you to Joshua.
The book of Joshua. Let's back up and remember the story so far. So God chose Abraham, and then his family became the people of Israel, who are then enslaved down in Egypt. And so
Right,
through
goes
Moses,
back to
God rescued Israel out
Abraham,
of Egypt. He
nation
made a
of
covenant with them at Mount
Israel.
Sinai, and he brought them
Moses
through the wilderness.
dies.
So Israel then camped outside the promised land, and Moses called them to obey God's commands so that they could show all the other nations what God is like. The book of Joshua picks up right after Moses has died, and Israel's ready to enter the land. So the story of Joshua is designed with 4 main movements. Joshua first leads Israel into the promised land, and then once they're there, they meet all this hostility from the Canaanites, and so they engage them in battle. Then after their victories, Joshua divides up the promised land
See,
as the
this
inheritance
is
for the 12
where
tribes.
there's a lot
And then the
of
book concludes
war.
with these final speeches that Joshua gives to the people.
In
So let's dive in.
Joshua, there's a lot of wars because they have to go to war in order to conquer the promised land. Isn't that amazing? How
Yeah.
the story of the Jews continues. So that's as far as we're going to go for class. Let's go back to class now. And at least you get a better understanding, first of all, of that resource. It's a really good resource. So, when you're studying a book, use that as one of the resources. There's more, it'll open the doors for more resources. And then after a while, you'll start seeing them repeat each other. And some of them add to what you already know. And that's how you get a good grasp of each book. Does that help you, Daphne?
Yes.
Yes.
See, so going back and forth between reading the book, watching the video, reading the book again, underlining the verses that hit home with you, and at least you got a big picture that it's all about the story of the Jews, because it goes all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the 12 tribes, and on it goes until, we reach Jesus. Because then from Jesus, it's now opening, God is now opening the door for the whole world to come to faith. But it's through Jesus, who is a descendant of Abraham. Armando, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
I just want to answer the question to Brother John. Brother John, you just type in Bible Project on the timeline search on YouTube, and it should pop up.
Timeline search?
Yeah, because Brother John had a question in the chat, so I'm just answering this question. That's all.
Good. Well, there you go. That's what we're all about. So yeah, look up Bible Project and then type in the name of the book of the Bible that you're studying. You can even do it for Revelation. I know that interests you, John. So you just type in Revelation Bible Project and you'll get a whole bunch of that.
Me too. I like Revelation.
There you go. So look up Bible Project and then you get an idea, and then there's more and more that you can just, there's so much to learn. Aren't you glad God made us to learn? He's forcing us to learn.
Yes.
He doesn't want us to be ignorant and dumb. So,
Right.
we just gotta keep learning. Dumb sheep. Don't be dumb sheep, right?
Right.
But, that's the way God designed us. That's why he says make disciples. You know what disciples are, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're learners and followers. So learners and followers of Jesus, obviously. And then go from there. Keep learning and keep learning from there. Okay. Let's close in a word of prayer. Susie, would you like to close us? And then Princess is ready to play the music.
Yes.
By the way, thank you for your donation. I just received Zelle deposit. I appreciate you guys for that. God bless you guys for your support.
You deserve it.
God bless you for your support.
God deserves it.
You deserve it, Pastor.